I'm glad you're joining me for Sunday School today online. We need to review just a little bit so we can get ready for today's lesson. When Moses was living in the land of Midian, God spoke to him through a bush. And this was not an ordinary bush. This bush was burning and it never burned up. And God said, "Moses, go tell Pharaoh to let my people go." Where were God's people? They were in the land of Egypt. And because of that, God sent several plagues. Do you remember how many different plagues? 10. Let's review what those plagues were. First, there was water to blood, then frogs, then lice and flies. Death of livestock, boils, a hailstorm, locusts, darkness, and last of all was death of the firstborn. I'm going to take away 2 of them this time, and you see if you can name which ones are missing. Ready? Frogs and flies. Let me try it again. Now can you see what's missing? Boils and death of firstborn. Let's try it one more time, but this time I'm going to shuffle them all up and see if you can see what's missing. Can you figure out which one's missing? Hailstorm and water to blood. One more time, but this time I'm going to make it really difficult. All of them are missing, and I want to see if you can put them in order. Are you ready? 1, water to blood. 2, frogs. 3, lice. 4, flies. 5, death of livestock. 6, boils. 7, hailstorm. 8, locusts. 9, darkness. And 10, death of all the firstborn. After that last plague, Pharaoh did let his people go, and that leads us into our story today. As soon as Pharaoh set them free, the Hebrew slaves set off in a hurry to leave Egypt. They took with them all of their belongings, plus the gold, silver, and gifts the Egyptians had given them. God led them into the desert by the Red Sea. During the day, God led them in a pillar of cloud that always stayed in front of them and never disappeared. All night, God led them in a pillar of fire that lit up the route. Eventually, God led them to the shore of the Red Sea where they camped. Meanwhile, just as God warned Moses, Pharaoh and the Egyptians changed their minds and wanted the Hebrews back as their slaves. Pharaoh got in his chariot and gathered all his troops and 600 chariots to chase after the escaping Hebrews. When the escaping people saw the troops approaching, they cried out in fear. "Have you brought us out in the desert to die?" they complained to Moses. "We'd rather be alive as slaves in Egypt than die in the desert." "Don't be afraid," replied Moses. "Stand firm and see how God is going to deliver you. The Lord is going to fight for us, and you will never again see the Egyptians." "Tell the people, move forward toward the Red Sea," God told Moses. "Then hold your staff high and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide it so they can cross it on dry land." Moses obeyed. The freed slaves watched as the pillar of cloud that had been leading them moved between them and the chasing Egyptians. That night they were in light, and the Egyptians were in darkness. God drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The people crossed through the sea with a wall of water either side of them. The Egyptians tried to chase after them, but God jammed the wheels of their chariots, and there was confusion among the troops. "God is fighting against us," they yelled. God then told Moses to raise his hands over the sea. At daybreak, the walls of waters collapsed, and the dry path disappeared. The whole army of Pharaoh were swept away. No one survived. Those safely on shore knew God had delivered them as he had promised, and they put their trust in him. They also realized that Moses was God's servant and the best person to lead them. Moses and all those who had escaped sang a song about their rescue to thank God. Sometimes I like to pretend about the story, and you can do the same thing. To do a pretend lesson about this story, I need something that looks like the Red Sea. And I have two little table runners. You could use towels or paper or anything that you'd like, but I'm going to say this is the Red Sea. And I'm going to lay my Red Sea out so that it overlaps a little. Here we go. Now I have the Red Sea, and all of the Hebrew people camped on one side of the Red Sea. Happened to have a bunch of glue sticks. You might have little toy people or some stuffed animals or anything that you would like to use to pretend that you have Hebrew people. So there are the Hebrew people camped outside the Red Sea, and they look off in the distance and they see the Egyptians chasing them in their big old chariots. So I thought, what can I use for big old chariots? Well, I have some Play-Doh bottles that look like big old chariots. Here comes all the Egyptian people, and they're chasing the Hebrew people, trying to bring them back to Egypt to be slaves. And they get really close, and God sends his pillar of cloud between them, so they can't get to them. So this pillar of cloud here is between them. What could I use for a pillar of cloud? Maybe a pillow? I don't have a pillow here at the church building, but maybe you do at home, and you can put your pillar of cloud to block the Egyptians from the Hebrews. And then Moses stands at the edge of the Red Sea. What might I use as Moses? Well, Moses was a hero of the Bible. I have a superhero, Spider-Man. And it said that God told Moses to raise his rod. I don't have a Spider-Man rod, but I have a pencil. So I'm going to let Spider-Man raise his rod. Here we go. If I put my pencil there, I may have to attach the pencil with some tape. So let me do that. I have some tape. I'm going to attach my pencil with some tape. If you don't have tape, you can just hold it there, or you can be Moses and hold your rod out. So Moses stood on the banks of the Red Sea, and what happened? The winds blew, and it parted the Red Sea so that it was like a wall on their left and on their right. And then all of the Hebrew people were able to run to the other side. So I'm letting all my little Hebrew people run to the other side. They ran really quick to the other side. But we got to get Moses over there too. So let's see. Let's get Moses over on the other side. All the Egyptians in their chariots, their soldiers started chasing. And the Hebrew people on this side were scared. They saw them coming. But just as they all get into the Red Sea, God caused that wind to quit blowing, and the water covered them up. Swept them all away, and they never saw from those Egyptians again. Today's memory verse is Exodus 14:22. Say it with me. So the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on the dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. Exodus 14:22. Let's learn this together. I will leave out a few words and you see if you know them as we get to them. So the children of went into the midst of the sea on the dry, and the waters were a wall to them on their hand and on their. Exodus 14:22. God was with Moses and the Hebrew people, and God is with us today. Sing with me. God is so good. God is so good. God is so good. He's so good to me.